The United States, a country founded on paganism, although the common meaning of paganism seems to imply atheism, a pagan can worship any other god not common to the God of the Torah, the Bible or the Quran. This also includes those who worshipped gods before the advent of the Judeo-Christian religions. As Mortimer Adler put it, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Cicero were Western pagans. The Western peoples of pre-Christian antiquity were all pagans in the sense defined. Many remained pagans during the early centuries of the Christian era, and from the 16th century on, the number of pagans living in communities that were predominantly Christian or Muslim has steadily increased. So, if we wish to find the origins of a government based on paganism, we must establish two things. 1. The lawful documents, symbols and mottos of the founding government do not contain any mention of Christian, Muslim, or Jewish religions. 2. The documents, symbols and mottos of the founding government describe pagan deities and concepts. Since the government in question involves the founding documents and symbols of the United States of America, we must satisfy the above two criteria with evidence for paganism and a lack of evidence for Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. This becomes ever more interesting in light of the recent religious rights movement in their attempt to convince citizens that the American government derived from Christian principles. The inspiration for creating this article came from deceptive claims by right-wing Christians about Moses and the Ten Commandments depicted on the Supreme Court building and other state courthouses shows their error by examining the very documents establishing the United States of America, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and the symbols and mottos used by the early Americans. In every case, paganism prevails and Christianity does not. In fact, paganism reveals itself so predominantly that it should give the reader pause to consider the power of Christian propaganda to deceive and disguise these obvious facts for so long. Although the first colonists in America came from Europe, mostly Great Britain, Spain, and Holland, many of them to escape religious persecution, Christian persecution no less, to establish a place of free Christian worship, these early European Americans eventually succumbed to the government of Great Britain. The religious right propagandists like to put emphasis on this period of American history, because, indeed, these first European Americans did live under Christian rule, and it makes it seem as if these first colonists established the government of the United States. They did not. Of course, the first Americans did not practice Christianity at all. Native Indians lived in America thousands of years before the Christians invaded their land. These original Americans got dispossessed, slaughtered, or segregated to the will of intolerant Christians. Today's religious right Christians conveniently leave out any mention of the original Americans, pagan to the very core. Only a very brief period before the formation of the United States could Christians call America their land. The following gives a brief historical summary. The Spanish founded the first European colony in North America at St. Augustine, Florida, in 1565. In 1607, the London Company founded the Jamestown colony. In 1620, the Mayflower ship lands at Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and its colonists formed the Mayflower Compact, a true Christian document, to establish a form of local government. But these early Christian colonies, the Puritans, became so religiously intolerant that a few of the colonists began to rebel. In 1636, Roger Williams founded Providence and Rhode Island, because his fellow Christians banished him from Massachusetts. Why? Because of his new and dangerous opinions calling for religious and political freedoms, including separation of church and state. Providence then became a haven for many other colonists fleeing religious intolerance. Just a few years later in 1646, the Massachusetts General Court approved a law that made religious heresy punishable by death. In 1692, hysteria grips Salem, Massachusetts, as suspects accused of witchcraft got arrested and imprisoned. These religious Puritans accused 150 people of their own citizens and they executed 20 of them. In 1700, Massachusetts passes a law ordering all Roman Catholic priests to leave the colony within 3 months upon penalty of life imprisonment or execution. New York passes a similar law. In 1702 in Maryland, the Anglican Church gets established as the official church. In 1706 South Carolina also established the Anglican Church as its official church. All of this occurred well before the establishment of the United States. These early European Americans began to feel very suspicious of the growing encroachment of Christianity upon government and personal freedoms. By the mid-1750s, a few of the colonists began to introduce heretical ideas. Benjamin Franklin publishes Poor Richard's Almanac, and he begins to question Christian principles. More and more Americans become wary of religious and political impositions on their life. In January of 1776, Thomas Paine publishes Common Sense in Philadelphia, which criticized King George III's allegiance to monarchy, and argues for American independence. It becomes an instant bestseller. Paine, a pagan deist, would later write Age of Reason, where he rejected Judeo-Christian tenets and scriptures. Remember that at this time the colonies belonged to Great Britain. Things had come to a head. The most influential American colonists rebelled against Great Britain and their taxes, institutional churches, and desired to form an independent government free from religion and monarchies. On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence, written by a pagan deist, announced their independence to the world.